In the spring of 2017, a young man named Jacob Gray rode his bicycle deep into Olympic National Park and vanished. The next morning, rangers found the bike standing neatly beside a guardrail, untouched, waiting. No footprints, no sound, only the steady rain of Washington's wilderness. What began as a routine search soon turned into one of the most haunting disappearances in the park's history, a case that would consume a father, puzzle investigators, and leave rangers questioning what they truly know about the forest they patrol. The Sol Duc River kept moving. The mountains kept their silence, and the park began to feel different, quieter, as if listening. Tonight, we return to the valley where Jacob was last seen, to follow the traces left behind and the silence that never left. Join us as we explore why the Jacob Gray case still haunts Olympic National Park rangers. The bicycle beside the road. On the morning of the 6th of April 2017, a park ranger driving along Sol Duc Hot Springs Road noticed something that made him slow down. A silver Kona mountain bike leaned carefully against a moss-covered guardrail. The chain was clean, the tires still full, and beside it lay a small pack, a helmet, and a few items of gear spread across the damp shoulder. The ranger assumed the rider had gone off to explore the nearby trails, perhaps the Lover's Lane Loop or the route toward Mink Lake. But the hours passed. No one came back. The bicycle belonged to Jacob Gray, a 22-year-old from Santa Cruz, California. He had set out alone from Port Townsend the day before, pedaling into the vast, rain-soaked wilderness of Olympic National Park. His father, Randy Gray, would later describe him as restless, someone drawn to the quiet parts of the world. He had no phone, no Jeep's tracker, and carried only basic supplies. Witnesses remembered him riding west in a drizzle, wearing dark clothes, with a bow and arrow strapped to his pack. No one could say exactly where he was headed. When the bike was found, rangers noted that nothing appeared stolen or disturbed. A sleeping bag was rolled neatly on the ground. A stainless steel pot, half filled with rainwater, sat near the road. A tarp had been folded, but never used. There were no footprints leading away that they could easily see, just the thick mat of ferns and wet underbrush. They waited a day, assuming he might return. When no one did, the official search began. Olympic National Park covers nearly 1 million acres of deep valleys, glaciers, and heavy rainforest. Spring storms can move in without warning, dropping temperatures to near freezing. Rangers started by tracing the Sol Duc River downstream, thinking he might have followed the water's edge. Search dogs picked up a scent that led into the forest, then lost it near a washed-out bridge. Teams scanned the trails toward Deer Lake and Bogachiel Peak. Helicopters flew overhead, but saw only endless trees, shifting clouds, and snow still clinging to the ridges. The early days of the search involved around 30 people. They used infrared cameras, drones, and canoes on the river. Volunteers from the Clallam County Sheriff's Office joined in, followed by mountain rescue teams from neighboring counties. Despite the resources, they found almost nothing, only a few personal items scattered along the Sol Duc drainage, as if placed deliberately. It gave the search a strange feeling, like someone had walked calmly into the woods and decided not to come back. As days turned into weeks, the official operation scaled down. The park's search coordinator, a veteran ranger named Lee Taylor, noted that the environment was brutal for tracking. Constant rain erased signs overnight. The terrain was steep and tangled, with fallen logs layered like matchsticks. She described it as a place that hides things easily. Some rescuers said they could hear the river far below, but could never see it through the mist. Jacob's father refused to give up. Randy Gray quit his job and moved into a camper near the park entrance. Each day he set out alone, following game trails and riverbanks. He spoke with hikers, park staff, and locals who thought they might have seen something, a dark figure crossing a bridge. A tarp left near the trailhead, a bow leaning against a tree. Most leads went nowhere. Randy carried his son's photograph everywhere, its edges curling from the damp. Months later, in August, new evidence surfaced. A group of hikers discovered clothing and a food wrapper deep within the Ho Rain forest, about 16 miles from where the bicycle had been found. Rangers compared the items with Jacob's gear list. Some matched, others did not. They organized another ground search, but again came up empty. The dense canopy turned sunlight into a dim green haze. Even experienced trackers admitted the forest seemed endless. Winter arrived, covering the region in snow and ice. By December, searchers could no longer safely access the higher elevations. Randy stayed nearby, hoping spring would reveal something. In interviews he said, "I talk to him out there every day. I don't feel alone." Locals began referring to him as the man who never stopped walking. He learned the sound of every stream and every section of the Sol Duc Trail, marking spots with colored tape and small stones. In August 2018, more than a year after Jacob disappeared, a group of Olympic National Park biologists, conducting a routine survey near Ho Lake, stumbled upon human remains. The location was remote, accessible only by a steep, unmaintained path. Items found nearby included fragments of clothing and camping gear consistent with Jacob's possessions. The Clallam County coroner later confirmed the identity through dental records. There was no sign of struggle or violence. The cause of death could not be determined. Rangers noted that his body had been found far above the valley, nearly 16 miles from where his bicycle was left, across ridges and waterways few people ever cross alone. It raised more questions than it answered. How had he reached that area without being seen? Why had he left his gear so far behind? Some park staff later admitted that the case changed the way they viewed disappearances. A few began keeping personal logs of unusual findings, unclaimed camps, misplaced items, shoes without owners. The forest, they said, seemed to hold its own silence. For months afterward, hikers reported feeling uneasy near the Sol Duc corridor, where Jacob's bicycle once stood. Some claimed they saw it in the same place, still upright, though the Park Service had long since removed it. To this day, the case remains one that rangers talk about quietly. They describe it not as a mystery to solve, but as something the park itself absorbed. In the mist-filled valleys of Olympic, where sound fades and the trees block the sky, the story of a single bicycle beside a road continues to linger, as if waiting for its rider to return. The search that never ended. When the bicycle was found, the official search began quietly. Park rangers marked the spot on Sol Duc Hot Springs Road as Point Zero. From there, they spread outward along creeks, ravines, and game trails. The first 48 hours were methodical. Teams carried radios, maps sealed in plastic, and scent articles sealed from Jacob's pack. The Sol Duc River ran cold beside them, swollen with snowmelt. It was late April, when the weather still shifted between heavy rain and sunlit fog. The Clallam County Sheriff's Office joined the operation on the second day. Searchers came from nearby Forks, Port Angeles, and Sequim. Helicopters from Whidbey Island Naval Air Station made slow passes above the tree canopy. The forest looked endless from the air patches of dark green broken by silver rivers and clouds of mist rising from ravines. Every movement on the ground disappeared once the helicopter pulled back. One pilot described the rainforest as a surface that eats motion. On the third day, they brought in the dogs. Bloodhounds from the Pierce County Volunteer Unit were deployed along the river. They followed a scent for almost half a mile before stopping near a washed-out footbridge. Searchers found an indentation in the mud that could have been a footprint, but rain blurred the details. The dogs circled, whined, and lost the trail. A ranger wrote in his report, "Scent dissipated, area dense, unstable footing, poor visibility." By day 5, the search radius had expanded to nearly 10 miles. Crews camped overnight at Deer Lake and Heart Lake, using radios to coordinate each section. They searched steep drainages and game trails where cougars and bears often moved. Nothing turned up. Rangers started marking areas with colored tape, orange for cleared, blue for revisited. It gave the forest a strange look, thin ribbons of color hanging between moss-covered trunks. Randy Gray, Jacob's father, arrived in early May. He drove from California with a small camper and set it up near the park boundary. From that point forward, he was everywhere the rangers were. He joined daily briefings, learned how to use GPS coordinates, and began walking sections on his own. "I can't just sit and wait," he said in a local interview. "He's out there somewhere, and I'll keep moving until I find him." The rangers were used to families visiting command posts, but few stayed as long as Randy. He developed a quiet rhythm break camp at dawn, walk the trails alone, return after dark. Some days he brought back items he'd found, a piece of rope, a can, a torn jacket sleeve. Most were unrelated. Other days, he found signs that disturbed him, small rock piles, footprints too old to match, or remnants of camps that seemed oddly arranged. By June, the official search had scaled back. Funding and manpower were limited. A few rangers remained on light patrol, but the command post closed. Randy stayed behind. He expanded his search deeper into the park, using a hand-drawn map taped to the side of his camper. The map was marked with red circles and notes like possible route, game trail, fresh debris. Locals began to recognize him at the gas station and diners along Highway 101. They called him the father who never left. He met hikers who offered to help. One man named Brian O'Neill joined him for several weeks, navigating the backcountry between Sol Duc and the Ho Rain forest. They followed the river, sleeping under tarps and recording coordinates. Randy carried Jacob's photo in a waterproof sleeve and showed it to anyone he met. A few hikers thought they had seen someone similar months earlier, a thin man with a bow and a dark backpack moving along the Ho River Trail, but none of the reports led anywhere. When the summer crowds arrived, new sightings emerged, though none could be confirmed. Some visitors said they saw lights at night near the old Mink Lake Trail. Others claimed they heard a whistle echoing from the ridge. Rangers checked these spots but found only fallen trees and animal tracks. The forest had a way of creating illusions. Wind through cedar could sound like a voice. The case began to draw attention online. Forums and local blogs discussed theories that Jacob might have gotten lost, fallen into the river, or chosen to disappear. A few speculated about hidden communities deep in Olympic, where people lived off-grid. Randy ignored most of it. His focus was narrow footprints, weather, terrain. In his notes, he wrote dates, temperatures, and barometric readings, treating the search like fieldwork. In September 2017, a new discovery renewed the effort. Hikers found a torn jacket and a food wrapper near the Ho Lake trailhead, roughly 16 miles from where the bike had been found. The clothing matched Jacob's size. Rangers reopened the search for several days, deploying ground teams once more. Helicopters circled above, their blades scattering fog across the treetops. Nothing else surfaced. The second winter arrived. Snow sealed the higher ridges, and heavy rain flooded the riverbanks. Randy refused to leave. "I'll be here until I know," he told a reporter from the Peninsula Daily News. Park staff began quietly supporting him, sharing leftover food supplies, letting him store gear in maintenance sheds. His presence became part of the landscape, another constant in the long silence of the park. Months passed. Each spring, the snow retreated and revealed new ground. In August 2018, the call came. A group of biologists conducting a marmot survey near Ho Lake had come across human remains and camping equipment. Rangers hiked in with the Clallam County coroner. It took several days to reach the site. The area was high, rocky, and remote. Dental records confirmed it was Jacob Gray. For those who had searched for over a year, the news was not closure, it was quiet acceptance. Randy returned to the exact place where the bike had been found. He stood there for a long time, not speaking. A ranger later said he just looked into the trees and nodded. Since then, Olympic National Park has kept Jacob's case in its training material. Search and rescue teams use it to understand how quickly a person can vanish in terrain that looks harmless from the road. To many of the rangers who were there, the search never really ended. It simply became part of the forest's long, silent record. The rainforest that hides everything. From the outside, Olympic National Park seems calm, a place of endless trees, quiet rivers, and mist that never leaves. But once a person steps beyond the paved road, the forest changes. Sound becomes different. Light bends through layers of moss and fog. Even the air feels heavier, filled with water so fine it clings to clothes and skin. Rangers often say that Olympic doesn't lose people by violence, it loses them by silence. The park covers over 900,000 acres on Washington's Olympic Peninsula. Within that space, it holds some of the most complex ecosystems in North America. From sea level to alpine snowfields, temperatures and humidity can shift drastically within a few miles. The Ho Rain forest, where Jacob Gray's remains were eventually found, receives more than 140 inches of rain each year. Trees there reach over 300 feet. Fallen logs rot into the soil, and new trees grow directly out of them, creating multiple layers of life stacked on top of each other. The forest floor is covered in ferns taller than a person's waist. Beneath them are holes and sink points where rainwater gathers. It is easy to step wrong and vanish from sight. GPS devices often fail under the canopy because signals cannot break through the density of trees. Radios lose connection after only a few hundred feet. Even drones have trouble navigating because the branches create false readings on sensors. During searches, rangers describe a kind of disorientation that has nothing to do with direction. The sound of the river echoes in circles. A person can walk toward it and find it suddenly behind them. Mist turns distances into illusions. One ranger, after years of operations in Olympic, said, "You can stand 30 feet from someone shouting your name and never hear them." In this environment, a missing person can remain unseen for years. Deer trails, often mistaken for footpaths, lead to dead ends or steep cliffs. Fallen trees block routes that appear clear on maps. Old logging roads have vanished beneath moss, their outlines visible only from aerial photographs. Helicopters flying overhead see nothing but treetops, a green ceiling that hides everything beneath. The park's rivers add another challenge. The Sol Duc, Ho, and Bogachil rivers all cut deep into the forest, their edges lined with unstable soil. Logs fall in and create natural dams that can trap debris or bodies for months. Heavy rainfall changes the current daily, erasing any trace of passage. Rangers once found a backpack wedged in a root system nearly 8 miles downstream from where a hiker was last seen. It had traveled through bends and waterfalls that should have destroyed it. In Jacob Gray's case, the terrain worked against every effort to find him. From where his bicycle was discovered, the land rises sharply into thick ridges. Beyond those ridges lie multiple basins filled with streams and marshland. To reach Ho Lake, the place where his remains were found, one would have to cross nearly impassable ground through areas without maintained trails. Rangers estimated that route would take several days, even for an expert. There was no sign Jacob had packed enough food or clothing for that kind of journey. The deeper problem lies in how easily the forest resets itself. Within a week of rainfall, boot prints disappear. Within a month, moss begins to reclaim disturbed ground. A tarp left out for only a few days can blend perfectly into the undergrowth. The rainforest is constantly erasing. One ranger described it as a place that refuses to remember what happens inside it. Because of this, search and rescue in Olympic relies heavily on scent dogs and aerial scanning. But in high humidity, scent disperses quickly and heat signatures blend with the warmth of the ground. At night, thermal cameras show hundreds of false readings from wet logs and rocks. In 2017 alone, over 24 minor search operations in Olympic ended without finding clear evidence of the missing person's route. For those unfamiliar with this landscape, it is easy to underestimate how isolation works here. There are no open views, no horizon lines to guide by. A hiker can move 1 mile off trail and be effectively invisible. Radios fade to static. Footsteps are absorbed by the wet ground. The silence that follows can be overwhelming. Some describe hearing their own heartbeat more clearly than the sound of their voice. Jacob Gray's disappearance became one of several that reminded park staff how the environment itself is part of the story. Rangers began to log microclimate data, temperature drops, rainfall rates, fog density, to better understand how each factor influences visibility. They also studied the movement of deer and elk, which tend to use the same paths humans follow when lost. Over time, the data confirmed what many had already sensed. Olympic's rainforest is a system designed to conceal, not reveal. Even with modern mapping tools, there remain vast sections of the park that no one visits. Some valleys have no official names. In one survey, the park's geographic information team marked several unverified features, places visible on satellite images but unreachable on foot. One of them lies only a few miles from where Jacob's body was found. When fog rolls in, the forest becomes almost featureless. Colors flatten into a muted palette of greens and grays. A ranger once described walking a single mile in such conditions as like moving through a dream that doesn't care if you wake up. It is this strange calm that gives Olympic its beauty and its danger. For park personnel, the Jacob Gray case remains a reference point. It demonstrated how a young, healthy man could vanish less than half a mile from a road and remain undiscovered for more than a year. It also showed that in Olympic National Park, the line between found and lost is thinner than anyone imagines, sometimes no wider than a step off the trail. The father who refused to leave. After the first week of searching ended, most volunteers packed their gear and returned home. The park's search and rescue office posted a short notice: search suspended, pending new evidence. But Randy Gray stayed. He parked his camper at a turnout off Highway 101, close to the Sol Duc entrance, and began what would become a year-long vigil. For many rangers, this was when the case of Jacob Gray stopped being just a file and became something that lived inside the park. Randy was 55 years old, with a calm voice and a steady pace. He had worked as a carpenter, a job that taught him patience, which now served him in the forest. Each morning, he rose before dawn, poured black coffee into a tin cup, and studied his map by the glow of a lantern. He divided his day into sections east of the river in the morning, west in the afternoon. He carried a small notebook, a compass, and his son's photograph laminated to protect it from the rain. At first, rangers tried to persuade him to leave. The forest was too unpredictable, they said, but he never argued. He simply nodded and kept walking. He followed trails even seasoned hikers avoided, places where moss-covered fallen logs thicker than cars, and where elk trails vanished into fog. He marked his routes with colored tape and small piles of stones, so he wouldn't loop back without noticing. Locals began to notice him: gas station clerks, park staff, campers at Sol Duc Hot Springs. They saw him moving through the rain with quiet focus, week after week. Some offered help. A retired fisherman lent him a canoe to check the Sol Duc River banks. A forest technician shared satellite maps printed from her office. Rangers who once thought of him as an outsider began to leave small notes at the visitor center. Checked trail near Mink Creek. No sign. They knew he would read them. Randy's persistence brought people together. Hikers joined him for weekends, drawn by the story of a father searching alone. One of them, Brian O'Neill, became a constant companion for several months. They hiked into the Ho River drainage, setting up temporary camps along the ridge. They shared simple meals of rice and beans, boiling river water for tea. Randy would stare into the fire and talk softly about Jacob, how he used to ride for hours through Santa Cruz's coastal trails, how he once wanted to cross the country by bike. As summer came, they widened the search area. Randy started carrying a handheld radio, tuned to ranger frequency. Each day he checked in, giving his coordinates and the direction of his next route. "Copy, Randy," the dispatcher would say. The park staff unofficially kept track of his movements on a board labeled Grey Operations. For them, his search had become part of their routine. Occasionally, he found objects that made him pause. A torn tarp, a single boot print pressed into mud, a broken arrow shaft. Most turned out unrelated, but each discovery renewed his determination. "Every item," he told a journalist, "is a question the forest is asking back." He spent that first winter alone. Snow piled around his camper and temperatures dropped below freezing. Rangers checked on him periodically, bringing supplies and coffee. He refused offers to leave. In one report, a ranger wrote, "Subject states he feels closer to sun in the park than anywhere else. Appears calm and healthy." When spring arrived, he resumed his pattern, walking, marking, returning. Word of his search spread beyond Washington. Visitors came from out of state just to meet him. They left small gifts, flashlights, food, gas money. A photographer from Seattle documented his efforts for a local paper, but found him reluctant to talk about grief. "It's not about hope or loss," Randy said quietly. "It's about doing the work until it's done." In late July 2018, a group of biologists studying marmots near Ho Lake radioed the park headquarters about human remains. The message reached Randy the same day. He drove to the ranger station, but said little. When the coroner confirmed the identity, he went to the site himself with the retrieval team. Rangers recalled how he moved with calm precision, helping pack the remains without breaking down. Later, he stood at the clearing's edge for a long time. No one spoke. The forest was still. Afterward, he visited the original site where Jacob's bike had been found. He cleaned the ground, gathered the items that remained, and left a single stone balanced on the guardrail. He made it home in his own way, he told a ranger. Randy's search changed how Olympic National Park handled future disappearances. Rangers began new outreach protocols with families, assigning liaison officers and maintaining open communication lines. Some credited Randy with showing them the human side of search operations, the persistence beyond official deadlines. Even after his son's remains were found, Randy didn't leave immediately. He spent another season mapping trails, helping rangers mark potential hazard zones, and assisting in smaller rescues. Locals began calling him the Quiet Ranger, a title he never claimed but quietly lived up to. When he finally left, he packed his camper with the same order he had kept through the entire year. On the day he drove out, the ranger who had first found the bicycle said it felt as if a part of the forest was leaving with him. The weather that morning was grey and still. Mist clung to the trees, and the sound of the river was low. For those who knew the case, it was the last time the park would ever feel that quiet. The Trail of Theories. When Jacob Gray's remains were found near Ho Lake, the discovery answered one question, but raised many more. His bicycle had been left 16 miles away, neatly resting against a guardrail. Between that point and where his body was found lay mountain ridges, river crossings, and thick forest with no connecting trail. How a young man, alone and lightly equipped, could have crossed that terrain remained unclear. Rangers and locals formed theories, some practical, others speculative, but none ever settled the matter. The first and most common theory was simple misjudgment. Jacob may have underestimated the conditions. It was early April, and the park's upper elevations were still layered with snow. Rainfall was constant, and night temperatures dropped below freezing. Without proper gear, hypothermia can take hold in under an hour. Rangers pointed to cases where hikers had become disoriented, shed clothing as their bodies shut down, and wandered far from their original path. In this view, Jacob had followed a river or ridge, become lost, and eventually succumbed to the elements. But others found that explanation incomplete. The placement of his bicycle and gear seemed deliberate, nothing scattered or broken, as if he had parked it carefully before walking away. Search and rescue veterans remarked that people in distress rarely organized their belongings with such order. His equipment suggested calm intent rather than panic. Some speculated that he had planned to leave the road from the start, that the park was his chosen destination rather than a mistake. Friends from Santa Cruz remembered Jacob as someone deeply interested in wilderness survival. He had once spent a week alone in the Sierra Nevada with minimal supplies, documenting his experience in a notebook. One entry read, "Out here, the world makes more sense." To them, his trip north to Olympic National Park might have been part of a personal challenge, an attempt to test himself in solitude. If that were true, the outcome could have been the result of confidence, meeting the park's hidden dangers, sudden storms, freezing rivers, unseen cliffs. Then there was the question of distance. The route from Sol Duc to Ho Lake is not one that a hiker takes by accident. It requires crossing steep terrain and navigating through areas without maintained paths. Rangers struggled to explain how Jacob could have made that journey without significant supplies. Some wondered if he had followed animal trails or attempted to reach a vantage point above the valleys. Others thought he might have been moving toward the Ho River Trail, planning to circle back later. Online communities began to build their own interpretations. On forums dedicated to missing persons cases, users traced satellite maps, comparing Jacob's known points to possible routes. Some suggested he had become injured and continued walking in confusion. Others leaned toward a more symbolic explanation that Jacob had sought isolation intentionally, perhaps as a spiritual retreat gone wrong. Posts analyzed his choice to bring a bow and arrow, interpreting it as either preparation for hunting or a gesture towards self-reliance. A few theories strayed into stranger territory. Some locals mentioned the legends of Olympic's wilderness, stories of areas where compasses spin or where sudden silence falls without wind. Hikers reported disorientation, as if the forest rearranged itself. In these tellings, Jacob's disappearance fit into a larger pattern of people vanishing in national parks under unexplained circumstances. Rangers declined to comment on such claims, though some quietly admitted that the park has places where GPS devices fail for reasons they cannot always identify. Investigators revisited the timeline. Jacob had last been seen leaving Port Townsend on the 5th of April 2017. Weather records show a storm moving through the region that evening, with winds reaching 40 miles per hour. His bicycle was discovered early the next morning, suggesting he had reached the park during or just after the storm. There were no tire tracks beyond the road's end, implying he had stopped voluntarily. Rangers later concluded that he likely entered the forest on foot soon after sunrise. What drove him to move deeper rather than seek shelter remains unknown. Randy Gray, his father, favored the simplest view. He walked into the mountains because that's what he loved, he told a local reporter. He didn't run from anything. He just went farther than anyone thought. To him, Jacob's journey was not mysterious, but human, a search for quiet in a place too large to measure. Yet even Randy admitted that certain details never aligned. The direction Jacob took did not follow any known trail toward the Ho Valley. The altitude where his remains were found suggested he had climbed far higher than expected, perhaps chasing a clearing or a view. In the years following the discovery, the park's Search and Rescue Division used the case in training exercises. Trains were shown photos of the bicycle, the map of search zones, and the terrain between Sol Duc and Ho Lake. They were asked to propose scenarios explaining the movement. None could fully account for it. The forest, as one instructor put it, gives just enough to make you think you understand, then takes it back. Theories also circulated about what Jacob might have experienced in his final hours. Hypothermia, exhaustion, or dehydration could explain his disappearance without invoking anything extraordinary. But the lack of struggle, the organization of his gear, and the vast distance between points kept the discussion open. The most experienced trackers said it was as if he had moved through the forest unseen, guided by something only he could sense. Years later, hikers still stop at the pullout on Sol Duc Hot Springs Road, where the bicycle once stood. Some say they feel nothing unusual. Others claim the area feels quieter than the rest of the forest, as if holding its breath. For park rangers, it remains a reminder that explanation and understanding are not always the same. In Olympic National Park, where fog moves like water and trails vanish overnight, even the most careful theories fade into the same mist that took Jacob Gray, the unseen pattern. By the time Jacob Gray vanished in 2017, Olympic National Park already had a long record of missing visitors. Rangers rarely spoke about it publicly, but within their ranks the files were known, each labelled by year, weather, and final point of contact. The stories followed a quiet pattern: an abandoned campsite, an unanswered call, a vehicle left at a trailhead longer than it should be. For most, the outcome was recovery after a few days. For others, like Jacob, the forest kept its distance. In the years surrounding his disappearance, several other cases drew the attention of search and rescue teams. In 2014, a 62-year-old hiker named Geraldine Jerry Lage was reported missing on a section of the Appalachian Trail that crosses into the Olympic boundary region. Her remains were found 2 years later, only 2 miles from the trail, hidden beneath tree cover so thick that helicopters had flown over it dozens of times. In 2015, a solo backpacker named William Brown vanished near Lake Quinault. His gear was later discovered intact beside a creek, his footprints ending abruptly on a moss slope. In 2016, a camper named Sarah Evans disappeared from her tent at the South Fork Ho campground. The tent remained zipped from the outside. Rangers began comparing maps. They noticed clusters areas where more than one person had vanished within a decade. The Sol Duc corridor was one. The Ho drainage, where Jacob's body was found, was another. These locations shared characteristics: difficult radio coverage, steep terrain, and high precipitation. But there was also something less tangible, an isolation so deep that rescue operations seemed to dissolve inside it. During a 2018 safety briefing, one senior ranger described the forest as a place that folds over you. His point was practical, referring to dense vegetation that closes behind anyone who pushes through. Yet the phrase stayed with younger rangers. They began using it to describe moments when even experienced trackers lost their bearings. Folded, they would say, when GPS failed or the compass needle drifted. Records show that from 2000 to 2020, Olympic National Park documented more than 40 cases of missing hikers or delayed returns. Most were resolved, but several remain open. The numbers are not unusually high for a park of its size, yet among staff, the concentration of unresolved cases in certain valleys is often noted quietly. The Sol Duc Ho region appears in more of those reports than any other section. One ranger, speaking in a 2021 interview, recalled a specific incident that changed how she viewed the park. During the search for Jacob Gray, her team had followed a narrow ridge above the Sol Duc River. They stopped to rest and radio in coordinates. The forest went completely silent, she said. No birds, no wind, no river noise, just silence, like the air had weight. Minutes later, the sound returned. It was a common phenomenon, she admitted, but one that made her understand why people feel disoriented even when standing still. Locals in the nearby towns of Forks and Port Angeles have their own stories. Hunters tell of finding empty camps with gear still set up, fires burned low but unattended. Trail crews sometimes come across shoes or single socks far from any established route. None of it points to one cause, but together they create the sense that people enter Olympic and do not always come back in the way they intended. In 2019, a search for a missing photographer named Liam Hart brought rescuers back into the same ridges where Jacob Gray's bike had once stood. Hart had gone out to capture images of the Sol Duc waterfalls. His car was found in the parking area with his tripod still inside. A week later, he walked into a ranger station, dehydrated but alive. He said he had followed the sound of the river and lost his sense of direction after fog rolled in. The forest changes when the mist comes, he told them. You think you're circling back, but it keeps moving. His words echoed earlier reports. Hikers described sudden disorientation, feeling as if distances stretched or folded. Compasses spun near certain rock outcrops where magnetic fields fluctuated. Radios produced interference near the same points. For rangers, these were physical effects of the terrain iron deposits, atmospheric moisture, but they fed into a wider pattern of unexplained confusion. The National Park Service later introduced new signage at several trailheads, warning visitors to stay on marked paths. Dense vegetation ahead can cause severe disorientation. Still, the disappearances continued, though most ended in safe recoveries. To those who worked in the park, the real mystery was not numbers but consistency. People leaving behind perfectly functional equipment, moving away from shelter, or walking uphill when lost. Jacob's case matched all three. Search and rescue instructors began using the term Olympic drift to describe how a missing person's movements often defied logic inside the park. Lost hikers would move toward higher ground, into more difficult areas, even when trying to find safety. In one internal report, a ranger wrote, "They go quiet, then the forest does too." No formal connection was ever drawn between these incidents. Official explanations remained grounded in weather, terrain, and human error. Yet for many rangers, the repetition left a quiet unease. They began keeping informal journals notes about strange echoes, missing camps, or places where radios always failed. One notebook, passed between teams at the Sol Duc station, contained the phrase, "The park does not take people, it just doesn't give them back quickly." When visitors ask about the Jacob Gray case today, most rangers give the same answer. It was a tragic accident in difficult country. But among themselves, they sometimes add that the park still holds places no map captures, where trails end but paths continue unseen. For them, the pattern remains not as a mystery to solve, but as a quiet warning carried in the fog. The records, the rangers keep. Inside the administrative building at Olympic National Park, there's a narrow room few visitors ever see. It smells of paper and rain gear, and its walls are lined with metal filing cabinets. On each drawer, a strip of white tape lists names, years, and coordinates. These are the records, the quiet history of people who entered the forest and didn't return on time. Officially, the files belong to the Search and Rescue Division. Unofficially, they are the park's memory. Every missing person case begins the same way: an object left behind, a car, a bicycle, a tent. The discovery sets off a chain of documentation that can last for decades. Rangers log the time, weather, and precise GPS point. They mark any footprints or personal belongings within a 100-yard radius. If animals are nearby, they note that too. The first few pages of a report are factual, but as the days pass, the tone shifts. Rangers begin to write small observations: what the air felt like, when birds stopped calling, which searchers couldn't sleep. These notes never reach public view, but they fill the margins of nearly every file. In Jacob Gray's case, the file began on the 6th of April 2017. The first page reads, "Bicycle located along Sol Duc Hot Springs Rad, mile marker 7, no sign of rider." Over time, the file expanded into several binders. Each contained copies of maps, weather charts, and typed reports. One binder held only field notes, dozens of handwritten pages from rangers and volunteers. Some entries are single lines: "Sent, lost near the river bend." Others are full paragraphs, describing fog so thick that even headlights dissolved into it. There are official forms for everything: vehicle recovery, canine unit deployment, aerial scan requests. But many rangers keep a second set of records, personal ones. They jot down experiences in small waterproof notebooks tucked inside their uniform pockets. Some are purely logistical: coordinates, elevation, time of day. Others drift into reflection. One ranger wrote during the 2018 search, "Forests silent after 14:30 hours, mist rising from ground, felt watched." Another noted, "Randy walked past again, didn't speak, left stone at marker." These entries are never meant for reports. They serve as a reminder of what can't be measured. Rangers who have worked in the park for decades say these informal notes matter more than any digital archive. They pass them quietly between shifts, adding updates or comments in pencil. One notebook, known as the Sol Duc log, has been circulating since 2009. It records unusual occurrences, unclaimed camps, voices heard from empty valleys, tools found on trails years after being lost. Jacob Gray's name appears several times within it, followed by the words "bike still clean" and later "father remains." The digital archive, stored at headquarters in Port Angeles, operates differently. It's efficient, structured, and searchable by date. Each case has coded categories: resolved, unresolved, open archived. Photographs are stored with timestamps, and aerial maps are layered with translucent grids. Yet even this modern system leaves gaps. Sometimes a ranger forgets to upload a handwritten note. Sometimes the weather destroys a field log before it's copied. The result is a patchwork of data and silence official history surrounded by personal memory. Visitors rarely imagine how much writing goes into searching for one person. Rangers keep daily operational logs, describing routes walked, meals eaten, radio issues, and encounters with wildlife. Every conversation is recorded, every sighting cross-referenced, but after the first weeks, those notes change. They become quieter. Descriptions turn to fragments. No sound but wind. Prints fade in rain. Night longer than it should be. It's not emotion, it's observation slowly merging with the landscape. When Jacob's remains were found in 2018, his file was marked closed, confirmed. A red stamp across the cover signified completion. But even closed files continue to gather paper. New sightings, reflections, or location rechecks are added. In 2021, a ranger added a note about hikers who stopped at the guardrail where the bicycle had been discovered. Visitors asked about Gray case. It reads, "Said the spot felt different. Weather, calm." 3 years after closure, the file had grown again. Beyond the cabinets, there's another kind of record marks left in the forest itself. Rangers sometimes carve discrete notches into trees or place stones at coordinates linked to cases. They serve as reference points for future searches, but also as quiet memorials. Near Sol Duc, one such tree bears a small brass tag stamped with JG17. It's not on any tourist map. Hikers pass it without noticing. The park's older staff members say that when they retire, they often take copies of their own field notes home. "It's not about proof," one ranger explained. "It's about remembering what the forest taught us." Some of those notes later reappear in ranger training sessions, read aloud to new recruits as examples of observation, patience, and humility. Others disappear entirely, tucked into boxes or left in drawers of empty offices. Together, these overlapping records, official, personal, and physical, form the park's collective memory. They reveal not just who went missing, but how those who searched tried to understand the land that swallowed them. The files don't tell stories of fear or ghosts. They tell of details: the angle of a river bend, the direction of fog, the sound of a father's footsteps fading into the trees. In Olympic National Park, memory is not a single document. It's layers of paper, moss, and silence records, written by both people and the landscape they tried to read. And somewhere in those quiet pages, the Jacob Gray case remains, not as a mystery solved, but as an entry that continues to grow, even when no one is adding words. The forest remembers quietly. When rangers speak of Olympic National Park, they do not describe it as scenery. They describe it as something alive. They say the forest listens. It absorbs each sound, each footstep, each unanswered call, and then folds those moments into its rhythm. Nothing is lost, only hidden. Over time, the landscape itself becomes a kind of archive one that keeps its records in moss, water, and soil rather than paper and ink. The Sol Duc Valley is a place where that sense is strongest. It is shaped by rain, by centuries of falling trees that grow again from their own decay. When Jacob Gray vanished, the rangers who searched for him began to notice details they had never paid attention to before. A broken branch that looked fresh one day would be covered in new moss the next. Footprints filled with water overnight, then disappeared by morning. "The forest reclaims faster than we can mark," one ranger said. It wasn't frustration, it was recognition that the forest has its own version of time. In many parts of Olympic, what grows and what rots exist together. Fallen logs are called nurse trees because they cradle new life. Their soft bark becomes home for ferns, fungi, and seedlings. In a way, they record what once stood there, leaving a pattern for what comes next. Rangers have noticed that search grids traced across these zones often change shape as trees fall or new growth appears. Even the boundaries of the terrain shift subtly each year. What was once a clearing becomes a wall of green. What was a trail becomes a stream. Animal paths play their own role in this quiet remembering. Elk, bear, and cougar move through Olympic, using invisible roots paths too faint for maps but constant in their purpose. During search operations, dogs often pick up scents that follow these same lines, as though wildlife carries traces of the missing in their wake. "Every living thing here is part of the record," said one tracker. "It's not evidence like we understand it, but the forest doesn't forget who's passed through." When Jacob's remains were found near Ho Lake, the site bore subtle marks of that process. The soil had formed a shallow depression where his body had rested. Nearby, a tree's roots had begun to grow around a fragment of fabric, slowly taking it in. A ranger present at the recovery described it quietly. The forest was already healing over him. It was not said in reverence, but observation, the way a place continues its cycle, regardless of what happens within it. Weather adds another layer to this slow recording. The park's rainfall, more than 12 feet each year, writes patterns into the land. Streams carve new routes, carrying fragments of stone, bark, and ash. Snowpack builds and melts, revealing traces of old fires and buried branches. Rangers who return to the same sites over years notice subtle shifts as though the landscape breathes in and out. They often say the forest itself decides when to reveal what it holds. Bones surface after storms. Lost tools appear years later, gleaming in sunlight that rarely reaches the ground. After major searches, when the command posts close and the volunteers go home, some rangers return alone weeks later. They walk the same trails, not to find anything new but to feel the terrain settle. One ranger described it as listening for the park to exhale. In those moments, the forest seems to return to its natural silence, a steady hum of insects, the low call of thrushes, the dripping of rain from cedar needles. Nothing speaks, yet everything feels aware. In the years since the Jacob Gray case, these quiet revisits have become informal ritual. Rangers check old sites not for clues, but to mark the passage of time. They notice how moss has grown over search markers, how roots have covered boot prints. A few leave small stones on fallen logs, continuing the tradition Randy Gray began during his personal search. Over time, these stones have become their own kind of map, an unspoken language between those who walk the forest's edge and those who patrol its depths. Olympic's ecosystem is dense, self-contained, and constantly moving. Fog rises from the valleys, drifts through the trees, and settles again as rain. The cycle never ends. It means that the park erases what happens on its surface, but stores it underneath, in layers of leaves, in sediment, in quiet. Scientists studying soil samples near Sol Duc once found microscopic traces of human presence fibers, ash, fragments of metal stretching back decades. Each layer corresponds to an event, a season, or a life that passed through. For the rangers who still talk about Jacob Gray, this is how they understand the forest's memory. It is not mystical, it is physical. The land absorbs what it touches, remembers through transformation. The tree that grows from a fallen log, the moss that covers a forgotten trail, the stream that changes course after a flood. Every disappearance becomes part of that endless reshaping. When newcomers join the park service, older rangers sometimes tell them, "You won't find closure here, you'll find continuity." The statement isn't about mystery, it's about respect for a landscape that keeps its own record. Long after files are sealed and names fade from reports, the forest continues its quiet accounting. Some evenings, when fog settles over the Sol Duc Valley, the guardrail where Jacob's bicycle once stood glistens with moisture. There's no sign or memorial, only moss, small stones, and the sound of the river beyond the trees. Rangers pass it without speaking. For them, it's not a place of endings, but of memory. The forest has already taken the story and filed it away, in the only way it knows, softly, beneath the rain. The silence after the search. When the final helicopter lifted from the Sol Duc Valley, the noise dissolved into the tree canopy, leaving only the soft echo of rotor blades swallowed by mist. The camp below, once a hive of radios, maps, and hurried voices, fell completely still. Tents sagged under the weight of rain. Marked routes on whiteboards were wiped clean. Within minutes, the valley returned to what it had been before, an expanse of dripping trees, grey light, and the endless hum of water. For the rangers, this was the moment that came after every search, the part no one trained for, the silence. Officially, the end of a search is recorded as a stand down. The process is precise. Logbooks closed, evidence bagged, equipment checked and stored. Coloured ribbons tied to branches are cut down. Jeeps' points are cleared. Command posts are folded into crates. Even the temporary shelters are dismantled, leaving behind only flattened grass and faint indentations where chairs once stood. The land, indifferent to the effort, begins reclaiming it immediately. Within days, moss covers the trampled soil. By the next rainfall, nothing remains. The forest erases efficiently, as though it were never interrupted. Rangers describe this stage as the hardest part. During the search, they live inside movement, calling coordinates, marking grids, following scent trails. When it ends, stillness rushes in like a tide. "You go from constant purpose to none," one ranger said later. "You listen for the radio, but there's nothing left to answer." They compare it to walking through fog after bright light, your eyes still squinting against something that's gone. In the main office at Port Angeles, the cleanup continues in silence. The last maps are rolled and stacked, and the radios are powered down. Each ranger signs the final entry in the operations log. The file receives a new tag: closed, no further activity. The simplicity of the phrase conceals the weight behind it. Some stay longer, rewriting notes, ensuring coordinates are exact. Others leave quietly, unable to sit in the still air of the conference room where voices once overlapped through long nights. When Jacob Gray's file was closed, It filled several binders. Reports, weather summaries, drone imagery, witness statements, all stored, all labelled. To the system, it was complete. But to those who had searched for him, the ending did not sound finished. Closure isn't real here, one ranger said. You stop searching, but you don't stop looking. Many return privately months later, walking the same routes without radios or maps. They do it out of habit more than hope. These solitary visits follow their own rhythm. A ranger parks near the same pullout where Jacob's bicycle had been found, steps into the forest, and follows the faint trail until the road disappears. No grid lines, no team, no urgency, just the sound of shoes pressing wet leaves. They pause where the first ribbons once hung, the ones marking point 0. There's no sign of them now, only ferns grown over the old stake holes. The ranger listens for a while, notes the quiet, and walks back. It's how we let the forest close the file for us, one explained. For volunteers, the silence arrives differently. They go home to towns far from Olympic, but the echoes remain. Many say they still dream of the forest weeks later, the smell of cedar, the damp weight of air, the sight of endless green folding into mist. Some continue to call the park for updates long after the case ends. Others never call again. In missing person operations, the end rarely feels like an answer. It becomes a space where everything unresolved settles without form. Randy Gray stayed longer than anyone else. After his son's remains were identified, he didn't leave immediately. He continued walking the park's edges each morning, keeping to his quiet scheduled coffee at dawn, map review, the same slow walks he had done for a year. He thanked the rangers who had worked beside him, often without speaking more than a few words. When he finally packed his camper, he drove to the pullout where Jacob's bicycle had once leaned against the guardrail. A ranger on duty saw him step out, stand in the rain, and look into the trees for nearly an hour. Then he placed a small stone on the railing and left. Weeks later, hikers found small piles of smooth river stones scattered along minor paths, each no taller than a hand. Always 3 stones stacked neatly. Some believed they were Randy's doing, quiet markers of gratitude or farewell. The rangers left them undisturbed. Over time, moss began to cover the edges, turning them into part of the forest's design. No one could say when the last one appeared, only that they seemed to fade naturally into the landscape, just as Jacob's traces had. For the park staff, the silence after a search becomes its own kind of teacher. It reminds them that every operation ends where the forest begins. Helicopters, dogs, and maps belong to human order, but Olympic follows its own rhythm. It doesn't reject human presence, it simply absorbs it. Within weeks, even the most invasive search becomes another layer of the forest's memory footprints, compacted into soil, scent trails washed downstream, the faint scent of fuel replaced by pine. Rangers who have served decades in the park speak about this absorption with calm understanding. They say each silence feels slightly different. Some are restless, as if the forest waits. Others are complete, almost peaceful. When it's over, you know it, one veteran ranger said. The air feels heavier, like it's closing a door. To them, the park's quiet isn't emptiness. It's a continuation of something larger than any search, an unbroken pattern of appearance and disappearance that has defined Olympic since before it was mapped. In the months following Jacob's recovery, new rangers were trained using his case. They learned to manage search grids, interpret terrain models, and communicate through dense weather interference. But the final lesson had no slides or manuals. The instructor simply told them to visit Sol Duc on a foggy morning and listen. The idea was to understand how the park sounds when it is done speaking. Today, the pullout remains unmarked. There is no plaque, no memorial, only a patch of moss where a bicycle once stood, a guardrail streaked with rust, and the constant dripping of water from cedar branches. Travelers drive past it without noticing. Occasionally, a ranger stops their truck there for a few minutes before continuing on patrol. They say nothing, but they always listen. The Jacob Gray case has faded from news archives, but among rangers, it remains a quiet reference point, a measure of what it means to search, to lose, and to leave without answers. The silence that follows each search, they say, is not absence, but acknowledgement. It's the forest's way of returning balance, of reclaiming what was disturbed. At night, when rain slides down the valley and fog curls over the trees, that silence deepens. It carries the weight of every call unanswered, every footprint lost, every file sealed in a cabinet miles away. And somewhere within that hush between the steady rhythm of rain and the distant flow of the Sol Duc River, the story continues, spoken in a language that belongs only to the forest. The weight of memory, years after Jacob Gray vanished, Olympic National Park still carries his name quietly. It appears in briefings, in stories told to new rangers, in the unspoken pause that follows whenever someone mentions the Sol Duc corridor. For those who searched, the case became less about the outcome and more about the lasting presence it left behind, a kind of shared memory that moves through people the way mist moves through trees. It never really lifts, it only drifts. Randy Gray lives farther south now, near the Oregon border, but the park has never left him. His camper is still lined with maps of the Olympic Peninsula, their folds softened from use. On a shelf sits a photograph of his son Jacob, standing beside the same bicycle that would one day be found alone. Visitors who know the story sometimes ask if he still searches. He answers gently, "Not with my feet." But he keeps track of weather patterns and park bulletins, marking storms on a small calendar. When the Sol Duc floods, or a landslide, blocks a trail, he circles the date. "The park still speaks," he once told a journalist. "You just learn to listen differently." Randy's connection to the Rangers never faded either. Every year, on the anniversary of Jacob's disappearance, a few of them call him or send short messages, no ceremony, no speeches. Just a few words like, "Thinking of the valley today." They say he always replies the same way, "Still walking beside you." Among themselves, the Rangers refer to him as part of their team, even though his role was never official. "He taught us patience," one of them said, "the kind that doesn't look like waiting, but like understanding." Inside the park's main office, Jacob's case file rests in the lower drawer of Cabinet D. It hasn't been opened in months, yet people still touch it occasionally when looking for other reports. The edges are soft from handling. The spine is marked with fingerprints that no amount of archiving can erase. A few of the rangers who worked that case have transferred to other parks, Denali, Glacier, Yosemite. But wherever they go, they take the story with them. "You carry the ones you don't find," said a former team leader. "Even when you do find them, you carry the silence that came first." Some of the younger staff who arrived after 2018 know the case only through fragments, training slides, faded photos, the legend of the bicycle at the guardrail. Yet when they hike the Sol Duc corridor, most say the same thing. It feels different there. The air seems thicker, the river quieter. One ranger described it as a place that listens back. Whether that comes from knowledge or imagination doesn't matter. The weight is real. Over time, the memory of Jacob's disappearance has shaped how the park approaches everything from communication protocols to family involvement. Rangers now keep daily reflection logs during operations, not just notes about weather or terrain, but short sentences about how the search feels. These aren't filed with official reports. They're kept privately, in notebooks that return home with each ranger. "You need to write it down," one supervisor said. "Otherwise the forest keeps it all." The community around the park remembers differently. For the locals in Forks, Port Angeles, and the smaller towns along Highway 101, the case became part of local law. Shop owners still recall the father who stayed through every season, walking alone into the rain. Some remember the small stone piles that appeared along trailheads. No one removes them. Over time, they've become silent guideposts, symbols not of tragedy, but of presence, proof that someone kept looking. When journalists revisit the case, they often ask why it lingers so deeply. There are larger parks, greater mysteries, longer searches, yet the Jacob Gray story holds a different weight. It's not about the unknown, it's about how ordinary details became permanent. A bicycle left beside a road, a father who wouldn't leave, a forest that returned everything except answers. For those who were there, memory doesn't fade, it changes shape. Rangers say they sometimes dream of the search of fog rising through cedar trunks, of radios humming faintly, of hearing someone call a name that the wind carries away. They wake not with fear, but with the calm recognition that the sound belongs to a place that will always echo back. Randy has visited Olympic twice since leaving. The first time, he came quietly, walking to the Sol Duc pullout alone. The second time, he joined a ranger crew working trail maintenance. They said he moved slowly, studying the ground, as if searching without purpose. At midday, he sat by the river, placed another stone on the bank, and said softly, "He's still here." No one answered. They didn't need to. Within the park, Jacob's case has become a reference point for humility, a reminder that the forest allows itself to be understood only in fragments. Rangers train new recruits to respect that balance. They teach them to read weather as language, to walk slower, to listen longer. The Jacob Gray operation is not listed as a cautionary tale. It is listed under Lessons in Observation. The first slide shows the photo of his bicycle. The caption reads, "Always start where silence begins." At night, when the rain settles into the valleys, the Sol Duc corridor looks unchanged. The same ferns, the same wet stones, the same river threading through fog. Yet for those who remember, the space feels inhabited by memory itself. It isn't haunting, it's continuity. The forest carries the same patience that Randy once showed, keeping the story alive without saying it aloud. Time moves differently in Olympic. What was once a recent event becomes history, then something softer. Visitors drive past the guardrail and never know. But the rangers who were there still pause each time their patrol routes cross the spot. They slow down, look toward the trees, and listen for a moment longer than necessary. Some say it's habit, others call it respect. In a place where everything eventually returns to earth, footprints, ribbons, even memory, the weight that remains isn't loss, it's recognition. The knowledge that people and landscape share the same silence, and that sometimes the most lasting traces are the ones no one can see. For the park, Jacob Gray's story became that trace, not a warning, not a mystery, but a mark of endurance. It taught the rangers that even when a search ends, the forest continues to hold what it was given, and it taught a father that listening can outlast looking. The weight of memory in Olympic National Park is not heavy, it is steady, like rain, like moss, like the sound of a name carried once through the trees and then folded quietly into the forest's breath. When the forest goes silent, there are moments in Olympic National Park when the air changes, the wind stops, birds fall quiet, even the rivers seem to lower their voices. Rangers call it the stilling a pause that arrives without pattern or warning. It might last seconds or minutes. No rule explains it, but nearly everyone who works the backcountry has felt it. They say the silence has weight, as if the forest itself is holding its breath. In reports, these moments appear as small notes between coordinates and weather updates. Sound dropped suddenly. No wind, no movement, 1,340 hours. The entry looks ordinary, but rangers know what it means. The forest has gone silent again. No equipment records it, no sensor detects it, yet every person who spends enough time there knows the difference between natural quiet and whatever this is. It's not frightening, one ranger said. It's absolute. You realize how much noise life usually makes. The stilling happens most often before rainfall, when the pressure drops and fog presses low across the valleys. The canopy tightens, moisture gathers, and the forest seems to listen to itself. The silence carries distance, it stretches across ridges, through layers of moss and fern. Rangers describe hearing their own heartbeat or the click of their radio knobs louder than they should. For a few moments, the forest feels enclosed, sealed from the outside world. During search operations, this silence can feel disorienting. Teams walking in pairs have reported losing track of each other within yards. Voices vanish mid-call. Dog handlers say their animals pause, ears raised, as if waiting for something. Once, during the early days of the Jacob Gray search, a ranger noted in his field book, 1,343 hours, complete hush. All sound gone, even river. Returned slowly. It wasn't superstition, it was documentation. Scientists who study the park attribute the phenomenon to weather and acoustics. Heavy fog absorbs sound waves. Temperature inversions muffle noise from above. The density of trees creates natural sound traps. It is explainable, measurable, ordinary. Yet even those who accept the explanation admit that the feeling goes deeper than science. You know it's weather, one ranger said, but it feels like the forest deciding to pause everything for a while. In the years since Jacob's disappearance, the stilling has taken on quiet symbolism for those who searched for him. Whenever the forest goes silent, rangers think of that spring in 2017, the bicycle, the mist, the unanswered questions. The stillness has become a marker of reflection, not fear. That's when we remember, a veteran ranger said. Not the search itself, but what it taught us. To listen, to stop. Animals react differently to the silence. Deer freeze. Ravens vanish from sight. Insects slow. It's as if the entire ecosystem understands the pause. When sound returns, it does so gently. One drip of water, one wing beat, one rustle of leaves. The rhythm restarts, as if the forest had been tuning itself. Rangers say the first sound after stillness always feels significant. Once, during a night patrol near the Ho River, a ranger heard a single frog croak right after the silence broke. It was like the park clearing its throat, he said. People who visit the park rarely notice these pauses. To them, Olympic already feels quiet, distant from the world beyond its borders. But to those who know its rhythms, the pulse of wind through firs, The constant whisper of rain, the sudden absence, is unmistakable. It's in that gap between sound and stillness that memory seems to live. Every ranger who has worked the Sol Duc corridor can name the exact spot where they first noticed it. A bend in the river, a ridge above Ho Lake, a hollow where fog gathers even on dry days. Some believe the silence is the forest's natural defense, a way to reset after disturbance. After large storms or human presence, the park often grows unusually still, as if collecting itself. Others describe it as communication, the land's way of marking an event. The stilling occurs most often in places where something once happened: old fires, floods, or searches. The Jacob Gray site is one of those places. In 2019, a ranger walking alone near the old search area stopped to record weather data. He noted in his log, no wind, air heavy, complete silence for approx. 2 minutes. Same location as Gray 2017. He didn't mark it as unusual, just observed it, like temperature or humidity. But later, when asked about it, he said the quiet had felt different. It wasn't empty, he said. It was full. This fullness, this dense, waiting quiet, is part of Olympic's identity. It's not danger, not omen, just presence. The park doesn't roar or echo. It absorbs. And when it goes silent, it's as if it's remembering everything at once. The hikers who passed, the searches conducted, the voices that once called through mist and never returned. For many who worked on Jacob's case, the stilling has become their marker of peace. When it happens, they don't move. They stop walking, lower their radios, and let the quiet hold them. It's like the forest is saying, "We're done for now," said one, "that whatever questions we have can wait." In this way, the silence has become its own answer. Not resolution, not meaning just the sound of continuation. The forest falls quiet, not to remind anyone of loss, but to restore its rhythm, to breathe between storms, to clear space for what comes next. When night falls over Sol Duc, the same pattern repeats. The air thickens, the river hushes. Somewhere deep within the trees, the park pauses again, just long enough for anyone listening to feel that faint weight, that stilling. And then, just as gently, sound returns. The soft drip of rain, the flutter of wings, the sigh of wind through cedar. The forest exhales. The day begins again. In that rhythm, the pause, the breath, the return, lies the story of every disappearance, every search, every ranger who still walks these trails. The silence does not hide answers. It keeps them, patiently, quietly, until the forest decides to speak once more. The river that knows the way. The Sol Duc River begins high in the Olympic Mountains, where snowmelt gathers in cracks between stone and cloud. From there, it winds west through dark valleys, through moss so thick it muffles the air. It moves quietly, even when it floods. The river has no interest in what happens along its banks. It only remembers in motion. To those who know this place, the Sol Duc is the one constant witness, the thread that ties together every search, every silence, every story the forest keeps. When Jacob Gray entered the park in April 2017, this river was among the first things he saw. It runs beside the road where his bicycle was found, its surface shifting with the grey reflection of the sky. Rangers who came to the scene said they could hear it before they saw it, a low, even sound, neither loud nor soft, just steady. They followed it downstream during the first days of the search, believing he might have done the same. "You always start with the water," one ranger said. "It's the only thing in the forest that shows direction." The Sol Duc carried their voices, their lights, their hopes. It also carried silence. When the helicopters left and the search thinned, the river continued its patient route, erasing the tracks along its edge. In that endless repetition, it became both guide and keeper. "If the forest forgets," said a ranger years later, "the river does not. It moves through everything we lose. Its path is shaped by memory. Fallen trees block its flow for years before collapsing into silt. Storms rearrange the stones on its bed, but never its rhythm. In winter, mist rises from its surface and drifts through the trees like breath. In summer, it thins, showing the smooth, pale rocks that mark where floods once roared. For rangers walking the valley, these stones act as the park's own archives, each scar, each groove a line in the long history of what the river has seen and carried away. When Jacob's father, Randy, walked the Sol Duc banks, he treated the water as companion. He spoke to it quietly, told it where he had searched that day, and sometimes left small pieces of driftwood balanced on rocks as markers. A ranger who joined him once described the ritual. He didn't look for signs in the forest anymore. He watched the current, said it knew where his boy went. Years later, during a flood in 2021, the same stretch of river cut a new channel through part of the valley. When the waters receded, a ranger found one of those driftwood markers wedged between roots, a thin branch, smoothed and darkened by time. He placed it back on the bank and noted the location in his log. Item found remains of grey search marker, he wrote. River still moving true. In the park's operations room, there's a map of the Sol Duc printed on heavy paper. Its contour lines trace every bend and side stream, every confluence where sound deepens. Around it are small pencil marks from past searches. Some are faded, others still sharp. Together, they form a second river, one made of memory instead of water. Rangers rarely erase those markings. They let them stay, as if the river's story and theirs are the same. The Sol Duc connects to other waterways, the Bogachil, the Ho, the Kalawa, but none carry the same tone. Visitors who listen close say it sounds different from other rivers, lower, calmer. It doesn't rush or echo. It murmurs. Even during heavy rain, it keeps its voice steady. It's like it knows where it's going, a biologist once said, like it never questions the route. For the rangers, that steadiness became a kind of lesson. They learned to work like the river, methodical, quiet, without demand for result. The Jacob Gray search changed their rhythm. It taught them that not all answers come from reaching a destination. Some come from continuing to move. The river doesn't look for an ending, one of them said. It just follows its own shape. When new recruits arrive at Olympic, they're often taken to the Sol Duc early in training. The instructors say little. They just let them stand by the water and listen. The current carries everything: rain from the ridges, ash from old fires, soil from forgotten trails. This, a ranger tells them, is what time sounds like here. The recruits don't always understand at first, but after months in the park, they begin to hear it, the low hum beneath the world, the constant, unbroken sound that has heard every search, every loss, every silence. As daylight fades, the Sol Duc glows faintly between the trunks. It catches pieces of the sky, blue, grey, then black. The forest gathers around it like a listener. Far downstream, where the river widens toward the coast, its current softens. There, the last traces of the mountains fade into salt. Some say this is where all the park's stories end, washed into the Pacific, but the rangers don't call it an ending. They call it return. The river knows the way, one said quietly. It always did. At the pullout on Sol Duc Hot Springs Road, the guardrail still stands. Moss covers its lower edge, and the sound of the river drifts faintly through the trees below. No marker identifies the place. Visitors park, stretch, take photos of the forest, and drive away. Only a few stop long enough to hear it, the quiet current moving beyond sight. It's the same sound that was there the morning the bicycle was found, the same that carried the search, the silence, the years. For the people who remember, that sound is enough. They no longer need reasons, only rhythm. The Sol Duc continues, slow and constant, carrying the forest's memory through rain and time, past the places where people once stood and called a name that faded into mist. It does not answer, but it does not forget. It flows through everything that remains, speaking the park's final truth in its unbroken voice. In Olympic National Park, where silence is law and time moves like water, the story of Jacob Gray ends where all stories here do not in discovery, but in continuation. The river moves on, the forest listens, and somewhere between them lies what memory becomes. Not sound, not loss, but the steady, endless motion of what refuses to be still. In Olympic National Park, stories never really end. They settle into soil, into mist, into the quiet between the trees. Jacob Gray's journey became part of that silence, a reminder that even in the most mapped places on Earth, mystery still lives just beyond the trail. For the rangers who searched, and the father who refused to stop, the forest gave no answers, only the understanding that some questions belong to the wilderness itself. If this story stayed with you tonight, take a moment to reflect on the places that remain unexplained, the spaces where nature keeps its own secrets. And if you'd like to keep exploring the quiet corners of our world, where history and mystery blur into one, subscribe and join us again. There's always another trail to follow, another voice carried by the wind, and another story waiting in the dark.